Nation. Hey, Zach Edwards here for another Friday presentation. This is a special presentation that happens every Friday, or at least when we can. This one is on the weapons of war between Civil War and World War One, and also why we put a lot of emphasis on World War II instead of World War One. Now, I just wanted to give you a little disclaimer that this is there's a lot of European languages in this commentation. My historian actually uses the actual names of a lot of the battles, so you might not actually know which one he's talking about. Mine is like Normandy, but you'll really like the fact of the information that comes out about the bombing, or the weapons that have been the change in weapons from the Civil War until World War One, because we went from the bolt action to the machine gun. And so it made a huge change in all warfare. So stay tuned for that. We'll catch you soon. Have fun on this video where we're talking to our historian, Conor Robinson. Okay, so I got a question for you. What's another subject that you're really passionate about? Misconceptions.
Just in what? I'm sorry?
I said misconceptions, but like Civil War or... You talked about some of them last time, but we didn't get to...
My area of speciality is the late 19th and early 20th century. So, everybody says World War One. The whole lions led by donkeys spiel?
No, I don't. Tell me more.
Okay, cool. So, World War One was obviously the worst war arguably the worst war to have been a soldier in. How General Sherman said war is hell?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the Western Front was 4 years of hell like General Sherman would never believe.
Yeah, and literal hell. Like the place with fire and brimstone. Literally.
Yeah, pretty nasty. But there's this misconception, and it's largely due to the literature that people read, because most people get what they got from World War One because the war poets, especially the British, like Sassoon and Robert Graves and Wilfred Owen, and right, these guys naturally took a bad view of things. Obviously, it was terrible, but at the same time, they don't have the training or the competency of the old British regular army, which is so small but pretty efficient, but it gets destroyed in like the first year and a half of the war. So the British have to kick off massive mobilization to create a new army, series of new armies, and the divisions that they create are called the New Army divisions. Problem is, the British really don't have manpower to spare to train them or equipment. So oftentimes these enthusiastic volunteers are being trained with broomsticks instead of rifles and things like that. It's not entirely that bad, but there's plenty of evidence to show the inadequacies of the New Army divisions. So when they go onto the Western Front or Gallipoli or wherever they are deployed, by and large, they are undertrained. They are, they have no experience, and they lack the competency, obviously, of the pre-war regulars. And despite all of this, though, when they go forward in their first, big battle, by and large, which is the first day on the Somme offensive, which is a big offensive to try to break through the German lines on the River Somme. And the deal is, okay, the men go forward, and most of them don't get out of their trenches, and they're massacred. And that's a very simplistic viewpoint of July 1st, 1960, which is to this day the bloodiest day in British military history. But so the whole lions led by donkeys myth really begins out of this, and it gains great traction at the end of the war in those 4 years, because it's the idea is that the generals, they don't know what they're doing. They're sitting 30 miles behind the line and stuff like that, drinking Chardonnay and whatnot, while their soldiers go forward and are massacred.
Yeah.
And that's a whole hell of a lot of baloney, because first of all, okay, there are different types of generals, like a brigadier. He's in command of a brigade of only 4 battalions. If he's 30 miles behind the lines, he's pretty shitty brigadier because he has to be. He's got to coordinate the attack of his brigade, so he's got to be on the scene at the moment, right there and then. And then, major generals, the next victims, they command divisions of several brigades, so they also got to be within the immediate vicinity to coordinate the advances of their brigades and whatnot. And then you get corps commanders, and they got to be there as well. But the whole stereotype of the British World War One general, right, which is exemplified in Blackadder Goes Forth, the BBC comic. Pretty funny, but absolute historically inaccurate. And just to give you an example, okay, you have 98 British general officers are killed in World War One, right? Out of about another 100 more who are wounded. So you have around 200 British general officer casualties in World War One. That doesn't really sound like they're hugging it out, hanging it out in the back, in the rear, drinking the champagne.
No, they're right there with them. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and then a perfect example of this would be the Battle of Loos, right? Very appropriately named. So Loos is a coal mining town in Belgium and northern France. The whole point of it was to attack, claim the high ground beyond it, and break through the German lines again. Right? It was fought in September 1950, and when it's a smaller operation, but six generals lose their lives at Loos. 6, right? 3 were divisional commanders and 3 were brigade commanders, but they were all general officers, So so that's a problem that has to be rectified, honestly. And again, the big reason why it's people understand World War One this way is because of who is widely read. I mean, you have Eric Marie Remarque, right, who was the German. He wrote All Quiet on the Western Front, paints a very, poor picture of things. And then on the British side, you have Sassoon and again Graves, and these were brave individuals, but they weren't, the pre-war regular army, right? And the old British regulars, they had a far different take on events comparative to the later new army men, because of course they're professionals, right? War is their business, and these new army troops, they came forward in a euphoric explosion of enthusiasm when war broke out, but they don't really know what they're doing, and they'll learn some very hard lessons too. And eventually, by the war's end, they're every bit as professional as the old war regulars were, but it takes time.
So Conor, yeah. So why is it?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, finish up and then I'll ask you a question. Finish up and I'll ask you a question.
Okay, go ahead. Ask me a question.
Oh, you said but something. Finish up that.
Why World War One? So people react to World War One naturally because it's World War One. It's global, but they have no clue about the previous 50, 60, 70 years of military innovation.
Okay.
Right? So you can find the first, you can find the seeds of the Somme and Verdun and the Western Front for Przemysl and Gallipoli and Kut and all of these, going as far back as the American Civil War, right? I mean, just look at Vicksburg or Petersburg or Spotsylvania or Port Hudson. These are all big attacks on fortified positions, and they generally follow the same pattern. You take a look at Vicksburg and Port Hudson, which were fought at the same time. And these are both cities on the Mississippi, and the Union's trying to take them, of course, to gain control of the entirety of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And they can only do it via the land. So what the generals decide to do naturally is they're going to try to take the place by assault first. Okay. And they fail usually. Grant, in the aftermath of his failed assault at Vicksburg, he was asked, "Why'd you launch these assaults?" And he's like, "I had to give the boys the opportunity. They wouldn't forgive me otherwise." So when they failed, then he becomes methodical and he lays down for a siege, and ultimately Vicksburg is starved into submission and things like that. But
is this when they sink the Star of the West?
no, the Star of the West was sunk earlier than that.
It was earlier. Okay.
Yeah, the Star of the West was Fort Sumter, and then it was sunk a few months after that.
Yeah, it was taken from down south and then sunk.
That was a very sad vessel. It had a really crappy, I wouldn't want to sail on. Excuse me, but in the 1860s, what do you got? You see more and more the advent of new technology, particularly the bolt-action rifle, right? So the needle guns. So you have the Prussian Dresa, and then the French Chassepot, and then the British will come out with the Schneider Enfield, and then you'll follow on with the Martini Henry and the Verdun, and the Gras and the Lebel and the Mannlicher Schunauer, etc., etc., etc. And what this does is you have a rapid increase of firepower. So where before, rifled muskets or single-shot muzzle loaders, if you could get 3 shots off in a minute, you were a good soldier. Now, you can force feed rounds into these rifles at a far greater rate and just saturate the attacking columns with bullets.
Yeah.
Right. But so it makes the infantryman's job a lot harder. The advent of the bolt-action rifle and the breech block and whatnot, and then you have breech-loading artillery, and this naturally brings about greater sophistication fortifications. So naturally, the infantryman, the attacking infantryman, his job is harder. It's not impossible, though. This is what people don't seem to understand. It's definitely not impossible, because it's always been hard to attack a fortified position. When the first Crusaders came to Jerusalem, it took them time because the walls, sturdy and they were repulsed. So attacking a fortified post is always hard. And the Prussian military philosopher Karl von Clausewitz, right, who wrote Vom Krieg, right, on war, he said, he wrote a whole book on the attack, and he noted the attack is always dying, right? It's hemorrhaging its life because as soon as the columns jump off, they're, losing momentum. They're taking casualties. The nature of the ground over which they are attacking is, destroying their cohesion and thus the power of their, attack. And if you don't have reserves immediately available to exploit the breach, if they make any, then they're not going to be able to go through because adrenaline can only carry you so far.
Yeah.
So, in the years between the 1860s and the advent of World War I, 1914, you see patterns emerge. Right, it's very difficult to assault fortified posts. It's not impossible. The machine gun is going to play hell with attacking infantry, and especially in the early 20th century, in the decade leading up to World War I, you have the Russo-Japanese War, 1904-05, where Russia goes to war against Japan in Manchuria. And there's plenty of evidence to show you just how grisly things are going to be in this modern day and age. I mean, the Japanese, they'll lose 60,000 men reducing the Russian Port Port Arthur, right? Because they're mostly attacking uphill, very similar to what's going to be experienced in Europe a decade later, and it's atrocious. You can see it at Mukden and Liaoyang in the same war. I mean, attacking, it's not impossible to achieve a breakthrough, but it's going to be costly. And this is what people don't understand about World War I. When you have peer-like belligerents who are on par militarily and they have the industrial capabilities to sustain those armies and that war effort, you are naturally going to get very nasty casualties.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You look at World War II, right? The German army, the Wehrmacht, the military was getting, was taking it from all sides in 1944. And yet, it was still a quite capable force well into, January 45 after the Battle of the Bulge, kind of like that. But the mere fact that it was capable of launching a massive winter offensive when everybody said, oh, they're on their last legs, I mean, again, that's just going to show you when you have an enemy who has got a capable military and the industry is there and the will is there, you're going to have massive casualties. So you can't just blame the generals, and you can't necessarily just blame, the tactics or the logic or anything like that. But again, people want simple answers to complex questions. And Clausewitz said of war, there's nothing so simple as war, but even the most simple things are complex.
Yeah.
So, you draw a line between them.
So really fast, Conor, I have a question for you. Why don't people talk about World War I? Like every time you hear about the World Wars, you hear about World War II. What happened? Why?
I think it's the tanks and the airplanes.
So the better warfare, the more interested people get?
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's a lot more interest in World War II for a variety of reasons. World War II veterans in small numbers are still walking around.
Yeah.
I think the Holocaust, honestly, right? Because, the Holocaust has hijacked is too strong a word, but it has taken control of the narrative, right? So when I was in school, in high school, and we were learning about World War II, and we were talking about, racism in the 1940s, right? My teacher, and it was American history class, mind you, my teacher decided, okay, we're going to watch Schindler's List. I think that's a great movie, but this was the only time I fell asleep in a history class because I protested watching that movie for a week, so I fell asleep in class for 5 days. It was great. And
was that because they were putting too much emphasis on the Holocaust and not the rest of it?
Oh yeah.
Was that the protest? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because my teacher, he's like, "Why are you falling asleep? Why are you so against this?" And I said, "This is American history class, and you're trying to teach us about racism in the 1940s. What about what the Japanese did to the men on the Bataan Death March? What about the African American servicemen who had to go through what they had to go through in order to..."
And my ultimate favorite is the American Japanese internment camps, and yet their sons were serving as some of the best soldiers in World War II in the Europe campaign.
Yeah, the 442nd.
Yes.
No one really talks about them, though. It's really annoying. And I mean, honestly, though, okay, people know far more about Auschwitz, right, than they do about Anzio. And the only military operation that really gets the light of day is Normandy, right?
Yep.
And even, because every year Normandy was important, absolutely. But in terms of amphibious operations, I mean, Salerno, Gela, Tarawa, and Anzio, of course. I mean, they were far more desperate than Normandy ever was.
And down in Italy, you have, come on.
Anzio and Salerno?
Shingles.
Yeah.
Operation Shingles.
Anzio, yeah.
Oh, is that what it is? That's the other name for it?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
If you have any comments or questions, add them to the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you next